Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of the Cleveland Sports Show. I am your host, Darius Sethna. Happy Friday to all of you out there, or happy whatever day it is, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, whenever you're listening to this podcast episode. Today's January 8th, 2021, our second episode of 2021, and our 92nd overall episode of the Cleveland Sports Show. Later in this week's episode, Logan Purcell will be joining me. The Browns, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in my life, are in the playoffs against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but there's more to cover than just the game. We're going to give you all the details surrounding that. Also, Cavs season's back, and they're above the 500 mark again this season. Cavs definitely showing some positive signs with their young core so far. We're also going to talk Premier League soccer and the standings, how they're shaping up. We're going to get you the latest info on all the matches taking place. So, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, grab some popcorn, relax, and here is our intro to the 92nd edition of the Cleveland Sports Show. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Darius Sethna of NordoniaHills.news, and the Cleveland Sports Show starts right now. Hello everyone, welcome to our latest edition of the Cleveland Sports Show. Once again, I am your host, Darius Sethna. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Speaking of joining, Nordonia freshman Logan Purcell is going to join us later in the show to talk about Cavs basketball, and man, the Browns are finally in the playoffs. This is the first time in both Logan and I's life this has happened. But first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get you caught up with your sports fact of the day. This sports fact of the day goes back a while. 1947 is the year. Today is January 8th, 2021, and on this day, January 8th, 1947, Toronto Maple Leaf rookie, we've got a hockey fact for you. Toronto Maple Leaf rookie Howie Meeker scores 5 goals in a game. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a record. That 5-goal performance on January 8th, 1947 from Howie Meeker was a 10-4 victory for the Maple Leafs against the Chicago Blackhawks. His 5 goals set an NHL record for most scored goals in a single game by a rookie. Truly phenomenal numbers. He had half of Toronto's goals in that game, and he scored more goals by himself than the entire Chicago Blackhawks roster. Now, Howie Meeker was a Canadian hockey player. He played in 1947, 1948, and the 1949 NHL All-Star Games, 3 consecutive All-Star appearances for Meeker. He was also a Stanley Cup champion in 47, 48, 49, and also 1951. So he has 4 Stanley Cup championships to his name as well. He also won the Foster Hewitt Memorial Award for excellence in hockey broadcasting. And in 1998, he was inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame as a broadcaster. The same year he won that excellence in hockey broadcasting, which was 1998. Sadly, Howie Meeker passed away this past November, November 8th, 2020, in a hospital in Nanaimo, Canada, near the Vancouver area. Howie Meeker passed away. But that was, what a feat. Phenomenal record. 5 goals for a rookie in 1947, Howie Meeker, with a 10-4 win, and they got the W. Toronto Maple Leafs defeated Chicago 10-4. And ladies and gentlemen, that's your sports fact of the week. Let's get you to some Premier League soccer, because it is the standings couldn't get any closer right now. To be more specific with the standings, Liverpool remains atop of the league. They have 9 wins, 6 draws, and 2 losses for 33 points. But hey, second place, Manchester United, is right behind them. Man United with a 10 wins, 3 draws, and 3 losses, They're the first team They and Leicester City, third place Leicester City, are the only two teams in the Premier League so far with at least 10 wins. Speaking of Leicester City, they come in at third place with a record of 10-2-5, 10 wins, 2 draws, 5 losses, for a combined total of 32 points. 3 points behind Leicester City is Tottenham Hotspur. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where the true grind of competition takes place in the standings. Tottenham Hotspur, 8 wins, 5 draws, 3 losses for 29 points. Guess who's in 5th place, also with 29 points? Manchester City, 8 wins, 5 draws, 2 losses for them as well. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Guess who in 6th place has the same number of points? Southampton. 17 matches played for Southampton. They're in 6th place. They have 8 wins, 5 draws, 4 losses, also for 29 points. The Everton's in 7th place. And ladies and gentlemen, guess how many points they have? If you guess 29, it's your lucky day today, because Everton also with 29 points on the season so far. 9 wins, 2 draws, and 5 losses. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we look at it, the point differential between 1st place and 7th place in the Premier League is by 4 points. 1 win for a team is 3 points in the league. So if you think about it, Everton, who's in 7th place, if they got 2 wins in a row, they could easily be in 1st place. And that just shows you how competitive this league is. It's been a lot of fun so far. The standings are showing that, and they are reminding us to always tune in every week. We also have a few more games this week in the Premier League to continue our season. Burnley will be taking on Manchester United Tuesday, the January 12th at 3:15 p.m. That same day, we also have games. Sheffield United will be going up against Newcastle, and the Wolves will be facing off against Everton. Wednesday, Manchester City will be taking on Brighton at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. At 3:15 p.m., Aston Villa will be taking on Tottenham, so make sure you keep your TV on after watching that Man City-Brighton game. And then Thursday, we will also have a game at 3 p.m. The only game on Thursday will be Arsenal going up against Crystal Palace. One game Friday, the 15th for you. That'll be Fulham going up against Chelsea. That'll be at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and then we have our slate of games going into the weekend, which includes the Wolves going up against West Brom next Saturday, as well as West Ham taking on Burnley at 10 a.m. next Saturday as well. In terms of stats, ladies and gentlemen, Mohamed Salah, number 1 goal scorer in the Premier League right now, 13 goals on the season. However, in second place, Son Heung-min of Tottenham Hotspur is not far behind at all. These goal-scoring statistics are just as high, or close would be the better word to describe it. They're just as close as the standings of the teams themselves. Son Heung-min of Tottenham Hotspur, 12 goals on the season so far. Bruno Fernandes, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and Jamie Vardy all tied for 3rd place with 11 goals. And guess what? Harry Kane is still the only player in the Premier League who has at least 10 assists. 11 assists overall now for Harry Kane. Kevin De Bruyne is definitely catching up, though. He has 8 assists, the Manchester City player. Bruno Fernandes and Jack Grealish tie for 3rd place, each of those players respectively with 7 assists on the season. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our Premier League news for this week. And now it's time to introduce Logan Purcell to the show. Once again, joining me this week, we're going to be talking about so much. Cleveland Cavs, they're 5-4 on the season right now. They are looking good. I'm liking this young talent. We're going to break down their current road trip so far. They have 1 game left on their longest road trip in the first half of this NBA season. And probably the bigger news, ladies and gentlemen, Cleveland Browns finally in the playoffs. The drought is over. Logan Purcell and I are going to talk about it right now. And here he is joining me this week, Logan Purcell, Nordonia freshman. Logan, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining me this week. We have a lot to break down, but I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, there is quite a lot to talk about, and thank you for having me.
Oh, of course, it's a pleasure. So Logan, I know all Cleveland sports fans, the number one thing on their mind right now is probably the Browns. But hey, don't overlook on these Cleveland Cavaliers, because right now they're 5-4, Logan. They're 8th place in the Eastern Conference, and they've had the majority of their road trip completed. They have one more game on the road. It'll be tomorrow at 8 p.m. at the Pfizer Forum in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Bucks will be hosting Colin Sexton and the Cavs. Speaking of Colin Sexton, Logan, he didn't play in their victory over Memphis last night. Cavs won that game, as I mentioned. 94-90 was the final score. However, the road trip was kind of iffy in terms of their performances. As I mentioned, they lost. We talked about that 20-point drubbing they had in Indianapolis against the Pacers, but they beat Trae Young and the Hawks. That was kind of a big win for the Cavs, 96-91 win. However, they went to Orlando, 2 losses in Orlando. The Cavs and Magic faced this past Monday. Cavs lost by 20 to the Magic, and Markelle Fultz suffered a gruesome injury this past Wednesday in the Cavs' second matchup with Orlando. Cavs got off to a great start in that game, Logan. In the first quarter, they were up 23-15. However, a 19-32 quarter in favor of the Magic. Magic scored 32 points alone in the third quarter and eventually won the game by 11. However, Cavs bounced back, 5-4 now with that after that 94-90 win over a tough, aggressive Memphis team. Logan, what have your thoughts been on this road trip so far? You know, Cavs have had some tough losses, but they've also had some grinded out wins. Is there really a game over this road trip that you've looked at and said that's true Cavs basketball, or is there a game that you've been very disappointed with thus far?
So, speaking of the second, Orlando game that they played, and, that you mentioned Markelle Fultz getting injured and that kind of stuff, and the huge lead to kick it off, I'd like to start off with that game, of course, but, based on, you mentioned how they kicked off really hot in that first quarter. Despite how hot they kicked it off, I felt almost like a fatigued sense from that entire team, I mean, despite Colin Sexton's blazing speed, he's a killer with the speed, that by far will always be his best aspect. He can shoot the ball every once in a while, but he's the speed guy.
Yeah.
It reminds me almost like a De'Aaron Fox. And they just weren't getting the kind of shots early that they wanted, or that I think that they should have been getting. And if you look at the box score, you watch the first 10 minutes of that game, a lot of the points are really offensive rebounds and Andre Drummond getting in the paint. Mm-hmm. So and getting up and down the floor and playing defense, they seemed a little bit fatigued in that first quarter based on what I saw.
Yeah, and also, Logan, in that game, Isaac Okoro returned for the Cavs. He'd been missing a few games due to a foot injury. He had 10 points in 28 minutes, no rebounds. He did have 2 assists. However, Colin Sexton, the highest-scoring man in that game for the Cavs, with 21 points, 3 rebounds, and 4 assists. And, he looked hurt in that game, that second matchup against Orlando, so it was probably a safe bet for J.B. Bickerstaff to bench him. And honestly, towards the end of this game against the Grizzlies, to me, Logan, was definitely a standout win because the Cavs did not play great at all. We also mentioned Dante Exum. We forgot to mention that Dante Exum's out now. He suffered an injury in the first matchup with Orlando this past Monday. It's a torn ACL, if I'm not mistaken. But Cavs had a very strong quarter last night against Memphis. 27 points alone in that fourth quarter. Larry Nance Jr. to me was the standout guy, Logan. I mean, Andre Drummond had 22 points, leading scorer for the Cavs, but Larry Nance Jr. finished second in scoring last night, 18 points in 35 minutes. His three-point stroke is looking fantastic. I love what I'm seeing from Larry Nance Jr., and he's a guy who can handle the ball too. Isaac Okoro has come up clutch in situations that have required him to be clutch. He had the game-winning dunk last night. What was your thought on that win against Memphis, Logan?
I really agree with you with the Larry Nance statement. I mean, I think that the Cavs were looking for a replacement for Kevin Love, and I think that they've really found this guy in Larry Nance. It's really versatile and quick, very well-balanced rim-running forward in Nance. And I think the fact that, I think he's one of those guys, and he's one of those positions where he's almost an old-fashioned player, if you look at a lot of rosters in the NBA, you don't see a lot of positions that can't shoot the basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about a guy who used to be, grinded out in the paint, Nikola Vucevic, now stepping out and shooting threes.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I see guys like that shooting threes now, I think, okay, well, maybe you do need to be able to shoot. And Larry Nance, these past couple seasons, has proven that you don't need to be a stroker from downtown just to be able to be productive and efficient in this league. So, but now that he's finally getting that shot, I think that this starting lineup and even the bench is going to get a lot more dangerous with Nance leading either helping out the starters or leading that bench group, whatever Bickerstaff decides. I think that is a huge factor, and I loved the win, even though John Morant didn't really get a lot of playing time, or I don't even think he played in that one.
Yeah, he didn't play at all. He's been injured for a few weeks now. Suffered an injury against the Nets a few weeks ago over our winter break. But another game that really stood out to me, Logan, was from this past Saturday, January 2nd, Cavs defeated the Atlanta Hawks. And, we were raving about the Atlanta Hawks and how great Trae Young was. I think Atlanta is definitely trending in an upward direction right now. And the Cavs, they didn't have a great start in Atlanta this past Saturday. They were outscored by 10 in the first quarter. They actually gave up 35 points alone in the first quarter. But they stayed poised, and they scored 52 points in the second half, 26 points in each quarter. They eventually, another grinded out win. They defeated Atlanta by 5. And, I thought Atlanta was a quality basketball team, but the Cavs, they showed some strength of their own. So after that Hawks loss, the Hawks are now 4-4, Logan. Are you kind of losing faith in the Atlanta Hawks?
Well, I mean, same with, we've talked about it in, a lot, and it's been mentioned, but it's really early in the season. I mean, come on, the Knicks were, 5-3 4-3 a couple nights ago.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's the New York Knicks. I mean, they're almost one of the guaranteed top 5 picks in the draft this year.
Well, right now, Logan, they're actually, didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to say, they're 5-3 right now. They've won 3 in a row. They're on a winning streak.
Yeah,
Fifth in the East.
That's exactly the kind of the stuff that I'm talking about. I mean, I don't think, not to, push any Knicks fans away or anything like that, but,
right.
The Knicks are not a playoff team.
Mm-hmm.
They won't be a playoff team, not for the next 2 years, in my opinion, unless they pick up some insane free agent within the next couple seasons. But it's too early in the season to tell, but I have lost the idea that the Hawks could be a higher seed in the playoffs.
Yeah.
The idea that maybe they could slip into that top 5, I kind of have lost that. Because, I actually thought that if Trae Young and John Collins really, took that next step, I figured they could maybe slip into the top 5 and be up with the teams like, the Sixers and the Celtics.
Right.
But, I've kind of lost that faith. I've thought more, same with how I feel about the Cavs, 7-8 at best.
And, too, Logan, the Milwaukee Bucks also, they're 5-3. They're not, we've always, these last couple of years, Milwaukee has just, destroyed the record books in terms of overall regular season records. This is usually a 60-win team we're talking about. And, right now, they're mediocre, 5-3. Cavs are going to play them tomorrow at Pfizer Forum on the road in Milwaukee. And I definitely believe the Bucks are going to win that game. But, they're 6 in the East. Boston, Indiana, and Orlando have a better record than them right now. So what are your thoughts kind of going into this preview, as we preview this Cavs-Bucks game? What are your thoughts on the Bucks, Logan, so far?
The Bucks are one of those teams, in my opinion, that are very hot and cold. They're not exactly a team that is going to be unbelievably consistent. I think they've kind of done similar to what the Cavs did in 2016 or 2015 when they brought LeBron back, and
yep.
They kind of brought in that star player, or they built that star player of Giannis, and they surrounded him with shooters. I mean, when you think of, a guy like Eric Bledsoe, you think of a really good defender, a down-and-dirty defender, and a relatively solid shooter. When you think of Drew Holiday, you think of a scorer, a dude that can put his head down and shoot the basketball. When you think of Brook Lopez, you think of a solid defender and one of the better shooters that we have at the big man position in this league, in my opinion. That team is full of shooters. So they're a very hot and cold team. Giannis is going to drop his 35-40 a game, and you're going to have guys around him shooting the basketball. So, in my opinion, this upcoming game for the Cavs, I'm looking to see Giannis get stopped. Isaac Okoro, whoever they decide, Larry Nance, whoever they decide to match up on Giannis, if they can keep him under 25 points, and the Cavs win that game or within, I'd say 5 or 6, I think it's a good day. I'm very, very big on stopping Giannis because if you stop Giannis, I think you stop every single, think of it like a gear. If you stop that big middle gear, everything else stops working. But that's how I think this Bucks team is.
Yeah. But also, Logan, you brought up some excellent points regarding how the Cavs certainly need to stop Giannis. That definitely needs to be part of the game plan. But the reason I'm still a little nervous, even if you stop Giannis, there's a guy by the name of Chris Middleton. And I know Chris Middleton, Logan, isn't Bradley Beal or Steph Curry, both of whom just finished with 60 points this week. So I want to congratulate those two. That is phenomenal. Steph finished with 62, Bradley Beal with 60 this week. Amazing. But going back to Chris Middleton, he's a streaky shooter, Logan, and he's got some ball handling skills. So, yes, you can contain Giannis, but I think that you also have to give some discussion points and some focus on Chris Middleton as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. But like I said, I think a lot of the reason that Chris Middleton has really emerged as a really good player is because of Giannis being around him. So, Giannis is almost, unless, you play teams like the Lakers or you play teams like the Nets, I think this year, we haven't seen the matchup yet, of course, but I think seeing the matchup of Kevin Durant guarding Giannis, and I'm talking about teams like Lakers and Nets, guys that can guard Giannis and relatively contain him one-on-one, guys like Kevin Durant, guys like Anthony Davis, those kinds of guys who have the length and the speed to keep up with him and defend him. I don't think that Chris Middleton is going to perform very well because I think a team like the Cavs is going to have to force a double team.
Right.
You can't let Giannis will dominate a one-on-one opponent every single time you give him the basketball. So the other teams are going to be double teaming, and I think that Chris Middleton has definitely emerged because of that. That's a huge factor. Now, not at all discrediting what he does, but I think that is a huge factor as to why he's become such a star in this league.
Absolutely. I'm really intrigued to see this Cavs-Bucks matchup. Ladies and gentlemen, that matchup between the Cavs and the Bucks will be tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time from Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That will conclude the Cavs' grueling 6-game road trip. This upcoming Monday, the Cavs will be back home at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in downtown Cleveland. Memphis Grizzlies will be in town. This is going to be great. What I love about this new schedule, Logan, despite during COVID times, is a lot of these teams are, playing each other multiple times in the same week. I'm not a Grizzlies fan, but I swear, Logan, I've seen the Grizzlies play like 5 or 6 times already this season because they've played the Celtics, they've played the Nets, and now they're going to play the Cavs back-to-back, basically. And that game against Memphis will be Monday at 7 p.m. That'll be game 1 of 3 in a 3-game homestand for the Cavs. They'll also be going up against Utah and the New York Knicks this upcoming week at home. Logan, I wanted to get into that schedule I was talking about. Do you think that schedule, what I was talking about, how teams see each other a lot more in the same week, is that going to be an advantage or a disadvantage as the season progresses? What do you think?
I definitely think it's based on, number one, the team that you are yourself, and then second of all, of course, who you are playing. Because, it is going to be a grueling season, obviously, 72 games I believe they're doing this year. But I think that it's going to be a lot more faster paced, and I think it's also going to be slowed down at the same time. I think early you're going to see a lot of, first half, you're going to see a lot of fast paced play.
Yeah.
But I think, that first game is going to be super quick, but that second game and that week is going to be super slow. You're going to see a lot of what you see in the playoffs. A lot of half-court basketball, sets, things like that.
Right.
Which, based on how the game has evolved in the past decade or so, it used to always be like that. Now you don't see, I would say every other possession or every 2 possessions is a fast break. But I don't think it's going to continuously be like that because the opponent is going to be looking to slow the ball down. Because if you're playing the same team more than once, you're going to probably end up being fatigued from playing that same team because, you play a team like the Cavs.
Yeah.
The Cavs are a physical basketball team. You want to play that Cavs team, twice in a week, you're going to be beat down. You're going to be tired. You're going to be tired. It's going to be time to slow it down, run your plays, shoot the basketball. Well, I think it's going to be interesting to watch, but I think you're going to really see the best scorers one-on-one in the league really play basketball well.
Cavs are, great point about the schedule there, Logan. And speaking of schedule, Cavs are going to have some tough teams coming within these next few weeks. They're obviously, we mentioned the grit and grind Grizzlies. They'll also be facing the Utah Jazz, who are always a dark horse in the Western Conference. They're going to be facing off against the Wizards, who, yes, they've struggled this season, but that doesn't mean their level of firepower has decreased. Nets will also come to Cleveland later this month. Cavs will be in Boston and will host the Lakers as well this month. So the Cavs, they're going to have their hands full in the rest of January, so you're definitely not going to want to miss out on those games. Logan and I will keep you informed on the Cavs schedule, but also I wanted to get into a little bit of the standings here before we talk Browns, Logan, for the NBA. We really haven't talked about the Western Conference as much. I always feel like we've been talking about the Sixers, the Celtics, obviously the Cavs, the Hawks. We really haven't had a chance to really dive deep into this Western Conference. And the Suns, the Phoenix Suns, Logan, have been phenomenal. They're 6-2 on the year right now. They just won their most recent game, 3-1 at home and on the road. The Chris Paul, Devin Booker backcourt has been working just as great as I thought it would, if not better. And then what really surprised me, Logan, is this Suns supporting cast. You've got guys like, Mikal Bridges stepping in. If you look at other players on the Suns roster, bringing it up right now, Jay Crowder's also there, Dario Saric, Etuan Moore, Langston Galloway. I like what I see from this team. Cameron Payne has come out of his shell. I like what I'm seeing from the Suns team. What are your thoughts on the Western Conference leading Suns right now?
Yeah, I think, a lot of credit does have to go to the supporting cast with the Suns. As you mentioned, the guys like Etuan Moore, Dario Saric. And I think Dario Saric was really good in Philadelphia. I just didn't feel like he was in the right situation with a really ball-dominant big like Joel Embiid. I just feel like he needed a place where he would be able to get the ball a little bit more. Maybe not, be a number one guy like I mentioned with Obi Toppin, but, maybe be a third or fourth option. And I think he's finally found that place in Phoenix. But at the same time, when I see something like this, you see a in my opinion, very dysfunctional young team last year on the Suns. A team that looked like they had nowhere to go. I think a lot of credit has to go to Chris Paul here. This veteran has obviously worked his magic. He came in to a nearly impossible situation with a dude that knows how to score the basketball but hasn't ever really competed. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a really a high ceiling for a really solid young center in DeAndre Ayton. Yeah. And a lot of really young supporting cast, because all those guys that you mentioned, not many of them are above 30 years old. A guy like Dario Saric, Langston Galloway, Cameron Payne, guys like that are not old guys. They're still young at the time that they are, and I think that they needed a veteran to come out and show them how to come out of their shell, how to really play basketball. And I think that a lot of credit here has to go to Chris Paul. But I really like this team, and this team has done exactly what I think we talked about right as the season was beginning, and I think this team could really flip in at a 6 or 7 seed.
Yeah, definitely agree. I also think head coach Monty Williams has done a phenomenal job in Phoenix. As you may have known, Logan, in the bubble this past summer, Phoenix didn't make the playoffs, but those 8 games, those seeding games, they went 8-0. They won all their 8 seeding games, but we know how tight the Western Conference was. It just wasn't enough. And it looks like the Suns are continuing on that right path. As I mentioned, 6-2. They're 5-2 against conference opponents. So very excited to see what Chris Paul and Devin Booker will be able to muster up. Last but certainly not least, Logan, you were talking about the Warriors last week, how you were kind of disappointed with them and how their season had been going. Right now, Golden State's 4-4. They just lost their most recent game to the Los Angeles Clippers by 7. They're going to play the Clippers again tonight. Steph Curry had a 62-point masterpiece this past Sunday against the Trailblazers, Logan. I don't know if he was had some extra energy that the Browns maybe made the playoffs, but it's most likely not the case. However, what was your thought on that 62-point performance and how Steph's been able to kind of propel the Warriors, and what do they need to do without Klay Thompson to find that competitive energy?
Yeah, so unfortunately I wasn't able to get to watch that game, but I watched the highlights of that game, and what I saw from that game might be a little bit more surprising than what you might believe. I saw, of course, the threes and the layups and the contested finishes and all the 62 points that Curry dropped that night, but what I saw were some really good passing by Steph Curry. From the team, don't get me wrong, great ball movement all around, but what I really saw was Steph Curry moving the ball. And, in my opinion, Steph Curry's always been a solid passer, but, I can't say that I've ever seen him pass the ball the way that he did that night. And that really kind of is a testament to his character. And they are riding the hot hand, but, he's still finding a way to get the ball to his teammates, which is a lot of credit to him. But I think that is a sign that maybe he was just waiting to find a chance to really become that playmaker that he's always needed to be.
Yeah.
Because when he had KD and when Draymond was in his prime, and even Klay Thompson, don't get me wrong, Klay Thompson has always been a great catch and shoot guy, but he could still make his own play off screens and things like that. But guys like Kevin Durant, Draymond Green used to be able to get their shot off the dribble. So he never really had to take that playmaker role, but I think that night, he did a phenomenal job of moving the ball as well as getting his own shot. So, of course, the 62 points was absolutely insane, but I think the passing was just as impressive in that game.
Yeah, we as Steph Curry, we love seeing the guy shoot. Obviously, probably the greatest shooter of all time in the history of basketball. But one thing we tend to overlook is always his movement without the ball. Even when Kevin Durant was in Golden State, his movement off the ball was really something to behold. That's why he was able to get so many threes and so many shots, open shots as well, because of that quality movement without the ball. Then you just add the basketball intelligence of Steve Kerr. But it's even record-wise, they still need Klay. They're, as I mentioned, 4-4. They're really going to be. It seems like, based on what I've seen so far this season, they're really going to be fighting for that last playoff spot. But we'll see. They play the Clippers tonight in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and we'll be very excited to see that as well. But as I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, Cavs-Bucks tomorrow, 8 p.m. from Fiserv Forum. And yes, it's finally time, the moment you've been waiting for. It's time to discuss the Cleveland Browns. Logan, Browns overall finished third in the AFC North, but they had a huge win against the Pittsburgh Steelers this past Sunday. It was the Browns were kind of pulling away there, but in the third quarter, second half, Pittsburgh put the gas pedal on. They scored 13 points alone in the fourth quarter. Browns won this one by the skin of their teeth, 24-22 victory. And we also saw, Logan, that the Browns, obviously finally in the playoffs, they're going to play the Steelers again this upcoming Sunday, but it's not going to be in Cleveland. It'll be at Heinz Field in Pittsburgh. And we also heard the devastating news that Kevin Stefanski, who tested positive for COVID-19, has to follow the 10-day rule of not being in contact with anyone. That was a rule established by the NFL. So Mike Frafer is going to act as the head coach this upcoming Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it doesn't end there, Logan. Other players will also be missing the game for the Browns. Joel Bitonio and wide receiver Kaderil Hodge will also miss the game after testing positive. But right now, Denzel Ward is back. As we know right now, they have Baker Mayfield obviously there, Kareem Hunt, you have Nick Chubb. There are so many storylines to take, and this game hasn't even been played yet, Logan. So my overall thoughts. Let's start on this past Sunday's game with Browns and Steelers. Overall, what were your overall thoughts? The Browns obviously had a strong start. They were up 10-6 at half. They extended that lead in the third quarter, but that fourth quarter gave me a big scare. So what were your overall thoughts on this Browns win, this critical Browns win?
Yeah. If I had to use one word to describe this Browns game, it has to be concern. I was really concerned watching the fourth quarter of that game. They pulled away in the first three quarters, but at the same time, you're talking about the two undebatable best defensive players on that team, Cameron Hayward and T.J. Watt, out.
Yeah.
And you're talking about Mason Rudolph at quarterback, which, is no scrub by any means, but, he isn't Ben Roethlisberger either. So I'm really concerned with the finish to that game and how quickly the Steelers were able to drive down that field. And like I said, don't get me wrong, that Steelers team was undermanned, but, it wasn't a team full of nobodies. They still had Juju Smith-Schuster playing in there. They still had Chase Claypool in the game. I mean, Juju caught the near game-saving touchdown at the end of that game. But I think that this Browns team is going to have to step it up and play better than that, because if they put up that kind of performance against the Pittsburgh Steelers this upcoming Sunday night, they are going to be out of this wild card round so fast that I think a lot of Browns fans are going to be surprised.
And, also, Logan, we just talked about this game, and it's going to be harder for the Browns because Ben Roethlisberger is going to be back. We mentioned the other T.J. Watt and Hayward are also going to be back for Pittsburgh. And, Mike Tomlin, this is a very, very smart coach, so he knows how to, get the right pieces going. I expect Juju Smith-Schuster to really come out of his shell this weekend. And what's worse for the Browns, Logan, is that Kevin Stefanski's out. So let's kind of talk about that. Let's go to that storyline right now. How do you think Kevin Stefanski's absence and now being replaced by Mike Priefer is going to change the dynamic of the team? Do you think that that'll have a major impact on the team, or do you think that Priefer, because Priefer has said that he's going to be an extension of Stefanski, do you think Stefanski not being there is, going to really play a devastating impact for the Browns?
Yeah, I do. I think Kevin Stefanski is a huge piece of the Browns offense, and of course the defense, is a big piece too, but I don't think Kevin Stefanski has as big of an impact on the defense as the offense. I think, in my opinion, Kevin Stefanski is just as big a piece of that offense as Baker Mayfield is himself. Because Baker Mayfield isn't Baker Mayfield without Kevin Stefanski. I think that, Baker taking that next step and playing a little bit better as of recent, which has been quite obvious, and just from simply watching the games and even looking at the numbers, you can tell. But I think that's a huge nod to Kevin Stefanski, and I think he's, in my opinion, coach of the year right now. I mean, he brought this 8-8, Browns team up to 11-5.
Right.
And he brought them to their first wild card in 18 years. And I think that is a huge accomplishment for him. So I think that it is going to be a huge loss for this Browns offense. And I'm really interested to see, the new head coach. And I know, as you mentioned, he talked about how he's going to be an extension of Stefanski, but I don't really care what he is, because he's not Kevin Stefanski. And to me, that's what matters, is if, you don't have that guy that's coming in grinding you in practice. He's grinded these past 17 weeks with this team. It's not the same.
And, also, Logan, Mike Priefer has not had a lot of time to coach the Browns themselves, with all these quarantine procedures of COVID-19 and the team not really being able to gather together, have a large gathering, to be more specific. It's really going to be tough for Mike Priefer, but from what I've been hearing, he's up for the challenge. He's ready to go. I guess one benefit is that in Heinz Field, I was with my grandfather and my grandparents. They live in Pittsburgh, so they're obviously huge Steelers fans. And they were telling me about, how Heinz Field is basically empty. No one can go in Heinz Field in Pittsburgh. So you're not going to have those rowdy Steelers fans with their terrible towels, and it's not going to affect the Browns psychologically because they're not going to be there. So that's also, a positive you can look at for the Browns. Also, I wanted to get your thoughts on this real quick, Logan, as well. The two players, Joel Bitonio and Kadarius Hodge, also will not play. Do you see that being a big loss for Cleveland at the end of the day against Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I do. As well as I mentioned, Kevin Stefanski, it basically made Baker Mayfield the player that he is right now, which I believe is about as true as anything. I think guys like on that offensive line, like Joel Bitonio, made Baker Mayfield who he is, because last year you saw Baker, I called him Happy Feet. even when he wasn't pressured, it seemed he was rolling out every single time, but that's just kind of almost habit.
Yeah.
Because it happened, 75% of the time he was getting rushed. You watch the game, he's not getting rushed every time, and he's learned to sit in that pocket and take the hit because he's not afraid to get hit every single time because he knows that it's not going to be every single time. So I feel like he's learned a little bit better to he's willing to sit in the pocket and make those throws, and that's, again, a huge nod to guys like Wyatt Teller, Joel Bitonio, and the rookie Tristan Wirfs, and guys like that. So I think the loss of Bitonio is going to be absolutely huge, just as well as Stefanski. And as for Kadero Hodge, I was really worried when OBJ went out this year, as I mentioned. When he first went out, we talked about it. But this guy, Kadero Hodge, has really stepped up and played well along guys like Jarvis Landry and Rashard Higgins and Donovan Peoples-Jones. He's played really well as that fourth guy. And the Browns are really popular for their 4 or 5 wide receiver sets. So I think that his absence is going to be pretty impactful for that offense as well.
Yeah, definitely. This is going to be tough for the Browns, but hey, Baker Mayfield's back. Most of the big names that you Browns fans know will be playing this upcoming Sunday. They will be suiting up, and the game will be on NBC. To be more specific on the time for you, ladies and gentlemen, the game will begin at 8:15 p.m. Browns, if you're a hardcore Browns fan, you probably already knew that, but it's going to be live on NBC. Browns at Steelers from Heinz Field in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. No head coach for the Browns. Kevin Stefanski will be out with those positive COVID tests. Logan, it's finally time for you to make your prediction. I always ask you what your prediction is going to be every Browns weekend. Are the Browns going to advance in these playoffs, or are they going to go home?
Well, yesterday I was talking to a friend about the game, and she was like, all right, well, what are you going to say? And I was like, I think there's going to be a big Steelers win. The last Browns game really concerned me. But since then, I have decided to change my mind, and I am going to take the Browns in this one in a 28-24 victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, because I think that the run game Nick Chubb knows that it's time to release the beast, if you will, and really run that football down the throat of that Pittsburgh Steelers team. And in my opinion, I don't even care who's stopping him, because there really isn't any stopping Nick Chubb when he's playing at his best. And I think that is going to be exactly what needs to happen. And I think Baker Mayfield's going to make the throws that he needs to make, and that's going to be that. So I'm going to take the Browns 28-24.
So even though the Browns, because the last time, wanted to mention this too, Logan, the last time the Browns were at Heinz Field was on October 18th of 2020. They obviously played the Steelers, and Steelers destroyed Cleveland 38-7. Now, yes, Baker Mayfield has certainly grown, has had a monumental growth spurt actually in those last few months since then. But did that play any factor in your concern? Does that play a factor for your concern of the Browns?
Well, in this case, I don't think it really does, because if you think about it, although it isn't that as long ago, you're talking about. I think this is a completely different Browns team. You're talking about a Browns team in Week 1 that got absolutely smacked and punched in the mouth by the Baltimore Ravens.
38-6, I believe that was the score.
Yeah, absolutely punched in the mouth. Then they come back just as of recent, a few weeks ago, and barely lost in what might be one of the best games I've ever seen in my life. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a completely different Browns team, and I think Baker Mayfield's hungry, and I think he knows that his time to prove himself and prove his money is now. So I think this is a really different Browns team than you saw against that Pittsburgh Steelers team.
Yeah, Cleveland fans, let's keep our fingers crossed. Browns Steelers on NBC, 8:15 p.m. this upcoming Sunday. But before we get into some quick Indians news, Logan, our other NFL wildcard games that will be taking place this weekend, let's discuss those. We have a slate of games, so if you're a football fan, this weekend is going to be the best weekend for you because you won't have to do anything. You can just be on your couch all day and watch football. It starts Saturday at 1:05. Colts will be taking on the Bills. Rams will be facing off against the Seahawks at 4:40. And also, Buccaneers will be taking on the Washington football team tomorrow at 8:15 p.m. So let's start with the Saturday games. Logan, which one are you most looking forward to seeing on Saturday?
Well, I'm really looking forward to see the Bills game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that Bills game against the Colts, right?
Yes, Colts. Yep.
Yes. The Bills against the Colts. I think that's going to be probably the best game because I think that Colts defense is real, and I think that Colts defense, right up there with the Pittsburgh Steelers, is going to be the best defense in the NFL. I think both of those defenses can force turnovers, and I think both those defenses have the ability to stop the run. But what I'm really interested is seeing Josh Allen, who might just be in the MVP conversation with Aaron Rodgers, which I think Aaron Rodgers ran away with it, but I think Josh Allen is a distant second.
Yeah, he's been fantastic.
And I think you got to put Stephon Diggs up in there as well, and Stephon Diggs has had a career season. So I'm really interested to see this duo go up against probably the number one or number two defense in the NFL.
And also, Logan, let's talk about Sunday's games as well. We just talked about Browns-Steelers, so let's leave that one out of the equation. So the other two games this upcoming Sunday, Ravens going up against the Titans, and then Chicago Bears in New Orleans for a matchup with the Saints. Which of those two matchups are you more intrigued by?
Well, I mean, it is the Bears and the Saints, so I can't be all that intrigued about that. I think the Saints are going to absolutely kill them. I don't think it's going to be much of a game.
Mm-hmm.
But I am really, really excited for this Ravens-Titans matchup because, despite the Browns already beating the Titans once and losing to the Ravens twice, I think the Browns, if assuming a win, would much rather see the Ravens again than see those Titans because I think Derrick Henry is the best back in the NFL, and Derrick Henry is only in his cage for so long. And as for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson is a great player, but he's a quarterback, so he's not going to be as willing to take hits as a big 6-foot dude like Derrick Henry at running back is.
Right.
So I think the Browns would much prefer to play a team like the Ravens. But what interests me about the game is both teams are high octane, and neither defense is really anything more than above average. So I think it's going to be a hugely contested, high-scoring affair between both of those teams.
So, quick question for you, Logan. Even with the Ravens beating the Browns twice this season, you would still rather have the Browns face off against the Ravens? Explain to me why do you think that a little bit?
Well, I mean, we've been giving Kevin Stefanski a lot of credit as head coach of the Cleveland Browns, and I mean, as a head coach, I think we can all agree that the more you play a team, then the more consistent you're going to understand how they traverse and how they work as a team. I mean, they've seen the Titans once, and it's quite simple. It's quite easy in the NFL to just throw something completely different at a team that you've already played. But the Ravens aren't, in my opinion, as versatile offensively. Despite having a guy that can throw the football fairly well in Lamar Jackson and a bunch of really solid receivers, they don't really have any A-plus players, but not named Lamar Jackson on that offense, in my opinion. When you think about the Titans, one name comes to mind, and that's Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
And on a board of, the best players or the most unstoppable offensive players in the NFL, Derrick Henry absolutely kills Lamar Jackson, in my opinion. Because all you guys do with Lamar Jackson is keep him in the pocket.
Right.
And, don't get me wrong, that is no simple task. But Derrick Henry, I mean, his knee's in your mouth if you try to tackle him.
Right.
So I think that Kevin Stefanski would if he's as good of a coach as we've all mentioned and as I've given him credit to be, he would know how to make the adjustments and he would figure out a way to beat this Ravens team. But I would much rather play a team that you've already played multiple times than go against a team that you've only beaten once, and it was a rough one.
Yeah, certainly excited. This weekend is going to be great for NFL ratings. So excited to see that Browns-Steelers game on Sunday. Well, NFL news is over. Logan, I wanted to talk about one last thing. We're actually going to talk about baseball for the next couple of minutes. And Cleveland fans, we've been super happy. What a bittersweet week for Cleveland fans because Browns make the playoffs, but in that same week, Francisco Lindor leaves the Cleveland Indians. He is out. He's signed with the New York Mets. So if we look at this Indians roster now, Logan, Shane Bieber's there, Jose Ramirez, Josh Naylor, Tristan McKenzie, I think, has a very bright future ahead of him. Roberto Perez is there too. So, what do you think now? Just give a little, what are your thoughts on this Indians roster heading into next season?
Well, in the shortened season that we had this year, I think that the Indians played pretty well based on what their expectations were. I mean, they were a playoff team. They unfortunately got taken out by the Yankees early, but I think this was a pretty solid team compared to what they were expected to do, and I think Francisco Lindor was the biggest piece to that. And I think that the trade that they decided to make with him was a really, really questionable one. I understand that, he might have been on his way out of Cleveland, or he might have been already preparing to sign, or whatever, this or that or that. And, they just don't. I don't think the Indians could have afforded to lose their best player. And, Jose Ramirez is a great player. Guys like Roberto Perez, Shane Bieber is one of the best pitchers in the league. But, I mean, I don't know if you can really say that there is another shortstop that is really up there with Francisco Lindor. There's a lot of great players in the MLB, but Francisco Lindor is he's really, really good, and I don't know if they got enough value back for him.
So, do you think it's now rebuilding time for the Indians, or do they still have some should they have some playoff aspirations with this roster?
Well, I mean, I'm going to compare this to the NBA, right? So, If you think about it, the Charlotte Hornets, for instance, right? The Charlotte Hornets could have playoff aspirations this year.
Right.
Unless, in my opinion, you're built like the Knicks and you have virtually nothing.
Right.
Then I don't think that you can say that it's rebuilding time until you've got proof. If they have an awful season this upcoming season, and then it's time to blow it up. Mm-hmm. But if you make the playoffs again at a lower seed, maybe you make another blockbuster trade, and you're one or two moves away from a playoff spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely interested to see. We'll obviously talk a lot more about the Indians when their season begins in the next few months. We'll see what the MLB does in terms of COVID protocols and all that stuff. But I was so happy we could at least see the Indians last season despite COVID. So, Logan, that concludes our latest episode of the Cleveland Sports Show. Thank you so much for your time. I know we always, I go on and on a lot, but I really appreciate you always having great answers and great analysis. It really has elevated this show to a much higher level with you being here. It's great to have another voice to talk to. And also, I wanted to say, Ben Hirsch, I actually do some basketball broadcasts with him, and he told me how great of a three-point shooter you are. So I just wanted to say congratulations on that too, as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a great time on the show with you, so thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Logan, have a terrific weekend. Go Browns, and thank you so much again for joining me.
Yeah, thanks.
Take care. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes. That concludes our latest edition of the Cleveland Sports Shows. And you were probably just thinking after I said that, Darius, please, no, I love this show. I never want it to end. It's like a 12-pack of donuts. I just never want it to end, pretty much. That's not the case, ladies and gentlemen. Although this episode is ending, I still have so much more to offer you from past episodes. If you're on NordoniaHills.news, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you just go to the contributors tab. And my name is the third one down. It's Darius Sethna, spelled DARAYUSSETHNA. Once you click on my name, you'll be able to see all the work I've done in the Nordonia Hills media community these last 3 months. I wrote an article a couple weeks ago about the Cavs and how they're preparing for their 2020-21 NBA season. I also have past episodes of the Cleveland Sports Show on there where Logan Purcell and I discuss the hottest topics in Cleveland sports. You can also find all of my work on my Twitter page. Just go to Twitter and type in my Twitter handle, which is @NordoniaSports. From there, you'll be able to find all my work. I post all my broadcasts to Nordonia Boys Basketball there as well. So you'll be able to see my commentary along with a couple other students from the Nordonia Hills Media Group who join me for those broadcasts. I've had William Bussey and Ben Hirsch join me. They do a fantastic job as well. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this week's episode of the Cleveland Sports Show. But make sure you check in very soon. We'll have another episode posted for you, and we'll talk about the Browns, and hopefully they move on. But we'll see. We'll also be talking about more of the Cavs and their season as well. Ladies and gentlemen, have a terrific weekend. Go Browns. Keep your fingers crossed. Have faith. We can beat the Steelers. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned, this is Darius Sethna of NordoniaHills.news. Take care, everyone, and have a terrific weekend.